Dr. Warrior is Ponca and is a licensed psychologist. She attended Little Priest Community College and went on to the University of Nebraska-Lincoln and received her bachelor's in psychology and master's and PhD in counseling psychology. Dr. Warrior is very connected to her culture and her tribal community, and she strives to create a system of care that promotes holistic healing. And with that, Dr. Warrior, I will turn it over to you to give us some more background information.
Thank you. We're going to kind of cover a lot of information, but it will talk a little bit about just the path with our education and then how we use research in our careers. So it's kind of a broad topic, but there's a lot of information that we'll cover. So I'll go pretty quickly through most of the slides of just some of the things that we're going to discuss today, but just real brief. So as I mentioned, I can get kind of windy, so I'm going to move through the slides very quickly. Okay, so I want to start off by introducing myself again. As she stated, I'm from the Ponca tribe of Oklahoma. I come from the Warrior and Little Voice family, and I grew up in White Eagle, Oklahoma. I'm always proud to say that I'm from White Eagle. I know sometimes I get kind of crazy looks when I say that to people in Oklahoma, but that's okay. I love being from White Eagle. So in my life, I am a daughter, a sister, an aunt, a wife, a mother, and most recently, a grandmother. And so this picture here that you see is of my beautiful granddaughter. Her name is Logan Morningstar Warrior, and she is 10 months old, and she's walking around. I just love seeing her walk, so she got an early start. I'm the owner and psychologist for Morningstar Counseling, and we're located here in Lincoln, but we provide telehealth services as well. So we provide behavioral health all across the state of Nebraska and parts of Kansas as well. And we connect through kind of like this medium, but we use something that would be considered HIPAA compliant to make sure that there aren't any security breaches. But it's a very nice way to reach rural populations, reservations, but having the technology is very helpful when we're providing services. So that's a little bit more about me and my family. So I'm going to jump right into the pathway to a career. Now, with this graphic, this is just a very simple graphic, but I wanted to be able to show this to you so you could have a visualization of what it looks like as you're navigating through school. As you start with school, what you'll see is that it's very broad. So for example, getting an associate's degree, you can have an associate's degree in liberal arts, in human services, but it's still very broad with the training and the education that you're receiving. As you move forward, let's say into your bachelor's degree, it will start to funnel down. There will be much more of a focus on the content, on the education, but it still gives you a very broad opportunity with what you're studying and where you can go with your career. And at any point in these areas of your career path, your educational path, you can start your career. I know of people who are very successful with an associate's degree, people who are very successful with a bachelor's degree. But as you continue to progress in your education, you will see that there becomes more of a focus. So when we talk about a master's program, which I think honestly is a lot easier to get than a bachelor's, because the bachelor's is so broad and the master's is really targeted. There are oftentimes in programs, there aren't any tests, but there's a lot of writing to do. There's a lot of discussion, a lot of reading, but it is so focused on the area that you want to learn about. It can make it easier. There's a higher level of interest that you would see as you're pursuing your master's degree. Once you move from that, you can move into a terminal degree, which would be a PhD, a Juris Doctorate, so a JD for lawyers, a medical degree, or a medical doctorate, I should say, ED, so a Doctorate of Education. Those would be your terminal degrees. And the reason why I put that outside of the funnel, because when you're doing that type of study, it's very, very focused, very, very specific with the training. But once you have that degree, you can pretty much go anywhere with it. And especially as a tribal person belonging to a tribal nation, there are so many opportunities and so much need for educated people to serve our Native people. So once you reach that, and honestly, any part of this career path is going to be helpful to you as a person, to your family, and to your tribal community. But thinking about that terminal degree, and that just really opens the door. So I really want to encourage you all to think about that just as you're moving forward, but remembering that it starts to funnel down. It's very broad when you start, and it funnels down. Okay. As you're navigating through school, you'll definitely see challenges as a Native scholar. So I will speak about some of my personal experiences that I've had, and I'll start with just the etiquette. There are many differences that we experience as Native people who have been raised by our grandparents, or just, really follow closely to our culture. And so for me, going to the University of Nebraska in Lincoln, it was very challenging because it was so competitive. And part of the reason it's so competitive is because, let's say a master's program there, they may get 250 applicants. They may interview 50 of those people and then accept about 10 to 15 of those applicants to start school there. So everyone's being very competitive. For me, that was really challenging because we're all in the same class, we're all learning the same thing, we're all striving towards the same goal. We should be working a little bit more closely together, have more of a team approach. That's not necessarily the case, and it didn't fit with who I was. And the assertive nature of the class and of the students when it comes to that competition was something that was really challenging. There were many times that I thought the students were just being rude with how they were interrupting, and that wasn't a way that I was raised in my culture, especially if we're in a position to where we're learning. We don't just interrupt or just jump in with questions. So that was a real challenge for me. Our presentation style is also something that was a challenge for me. When I'm home, and if there's any public speaking that I need to do, I either ask a veteran, and my husband at times, or someone older in our family, but it's usually always a male that does the speaking for me. And I started to challenge that as I was going through school, thinking, well, I'm having to do all this public speaking here. When I go home, I can speak for myself. And then I kind of had to check myself there, because that was a cultural component of my life. That was part of who I was. And I started to challenge that. So there were times where I had to really think about, okay, who I am as a Ponca woman, and who I am as a Ponca woman and a student at the University of Nebraska. So that was a challenge for me in moving through school, all the way through my PhD program. It was a very difficult challenge, a very difficult thing to get used to. With our family and cultural involvement, there are a lot of times where we're pulled away from school for various things that we need to address or in which we participate. And so those can cause challenges for us as well. Being the token Indian, that is something that you can see a lot of, especially if you're attending a school where there's very little diversity. And that was something that I definitely experienced at UNL. Just not a lot of Native people were attending the school during the time that I was there. And so there were times that I would be called upon to speak about every tribe, every nation, and it just didn't work. So that is something that can happen quite a bit, that you'll more than likely run into. And then the other piece is just the historical trauma. Anytime we talk about Native people, it's really important for us to recognize the historical trauma and the impacts that has had on our families, on our health, and how that has been passed down from generation to generation. So those are just things to keep in mind as you're navigating through your academic career. These are all things that once you understand can become strengths for you. So it's really important to just have that self-awareness and that insight about yourself, and know that there will be struggles, but they can make me stronger. So even though I've talked about challenges and how to navigate with those, or how to interpret those as strengths, some of the strengths that we do bring as Native scholars would be the resilience that we have. We are very resilient people. I know that we have nations now that struggle. We have relatives that struggle. But if you think about who we are as Native people and what we have gone through and the attempts of our government, the United States, to wipe us out, we are still here. We survive and we thrive. And that is so important for us to remember as we navigate through our academic careers and just through life. If you're going through difficult challenges in school, you're struggling with a professor, remember that the blood that runs through your veins comes from warriors. We are a resilient people, and that can carry you through, just remembering that. There's a level of acceptance that we have as Native people. Now, we can be judgmental. I'm not going to say that we're not, but we can be judgmental. But there's also a level of acceptance that happens. And part of that is because of our experiences, because of our historical perspective, what we have been through, what we have seen. All of that allows us to have such strong resilience. There's a lot that we can take. There's a lot that we can handle. And school is just kind of even though it can be very long term, it's just kind of a blip on there and something that we go through, but we can very easily overcome. Support as a Native scholar, that is something that is natural to us. In our Native communities, if we have someone who passes away, our community comes together. We have programs that will help support the family during that time. And that's typical of what you would see in our communities. And that's a support that we can bring as a Native scholar, things that we can remember as we're moving forward. Leadership and empowerment are major strengths that we bring as Native scholars. All of this is stuff that you can share within the classroom setting. All of this is information that you can help your colleagues learn, that you can help other students learn about. But that leadership and empowerment is something that is huge because that's not only for you, that's for your family as well as your tribal community. Okay. The iceberg illusion is something that I really like to talk about. And this is actually from an educational website. And we use this quite a bit as a psychologist. I use this iceberg illusion for many different things, but I think it's very applicable when you're talking about school and the progress that you make in school and just how people view you. Because what they will see is the success. What they will see is that you've graduated. What they will see is that you're doing well in school, that you've moved away, but they see the success. They don't necessarily see all of the things that go into that success, okay? And success is what we define it to be, but there's still so much that has to go into it. People will not see the failure, the sacrifice, the hard work that you've had to put in to obtain that degree. I can tell you that throughout my career or my academic career, there have been many times that I have failed tests. For my licensure as a psychologist, we have to take this huge exam. It's a national exam, and it's a very expensive exam that takes about 4 hours. And in order to be fully licensed, you have to be able to take this test and pass it. The very first time I took this test, I failed, and I failed by about 12 points. And I was so upset, but I thought, okay, 12 points, I can do some additional studying, go and take it again. So I studied as much as I could for another week and then went and took the test again and failed again. And so at that point, I just broke down. I was so upset. I was just crying. I didn't think I would ever get licensed. Sorry about that. I didn't think I would get licensed, and but I had to change the way I was studying and go back to how I knew I studied. So, for example, when I was going through the training for that exam that I was talking about, I listened to how everybody else was studying for the exam. What did they have to do to be able to pass the test? So I lost sight of who I was and what I needed to do to pass. So I took the next couple of months after that to study the way I knew how. and took the test again, ended up passing. But people don't see that part of it. They didn't see the failure, the huge loss of money that happened in that process, but they do see the PhD. So just remembering that there's a lot to it, and not everyone's going to see everything that you have to put into that success. So again, I just think this is a really nice illustration to share with people. So as we talk about academics and health research, just kind of shift gears now, you will see that in these two columns, I have some of the same words, specifically the empowerment and the opportunity, because both academics and research are opportunities that can empower you, your family, and your community. They can do that by, one, the knowledge that you learn, how you're able to change systems, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later, and then just what you're able to give back to the community. So opportunity and empowerment are extremely important, rewards, I would say, actually, that come from academics and research. When I mention on academics, the degree of personality, the reason I mention that is because as you navigate through your academic career, it's really important to study what speaks to you, what you feel comfortable with. A lot of people will go into careers or go into various disciplines in school, and they're thinking about the money or what they can do with that career, but then thinking about, okay, how does this fit with me? So for me as a psychologist, I don't typically feel like I'm at work. Meeting with people and providing treatment plans, it's something that I often leave work feeling rejuvenated. I can do 8 sessions back to back, write some reports, go home and feel very happy with how my day went, who I interacted with, and how things happened. So, but it fits with my personality. And so that's a really important thing to keep in mind. The 3 Ps are something that I like to talk about as well. So patience, passion, and perseverance. And patience, just in the fact that you're not going to get a degree very fast. You could be on a track to get a degree every 2 years, basically. So your associates, your bachelor's, master's, and just continue to move forward that way. But it does take time. So just remembering to be patient about that. Passion, that goes back to that degree of personality. So going with something that you're passionate about, that excites you, that speaks to you. And then the perseverance, that goes more back to that illusion of success with the iceberg. So that perseverance, you have to have that as you're moving through school. With research, you have a lot of opportunities to participate in research. And I would highly, highly recommend that at any level of education, you get involved with research, whether it's conducting research or being a participant in research. It's just an amazing experience that you can learn so much, and it really does lead to benefits for communities and for individuals. Some of the implications of research that you will see will be policy. So we have a lot of lawmakers, senators, mayors even, that read research. They will read medical journals. They will read sociological journals, psychological journals, all of those to inform themselves on what laws we need to change. What do we need to be addressing? Now, it doesn't always happen quickly, but a lot of research or a lot of lawmakers, excuse me, do look at research to inform their policy. There's education that will be impacted for you, for your community, and then even just the way we learn, because with research, there's a level of critical thinking that's going to happen. So you question things in a way that you haven't ever questioned them before, but it's a level of critical thinking that will happen. And that continues to grow as you go through graduate school. Research can also change treatment approaches and have an impact on ethical considerations. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about the treatment approaches through research as I talk about my work as a psychologist. Okay, so my work as a psychologist, with my training, we are considered scientist practitioners. So basically what that means is Science informs our practice. We're very heavily based on research, but then our practice also informs our research. So if there's a phenomenon that's happening during our work, we want to understand more about it. And in order to do that, we have to do research. And so that could be at a local level, at a national level, but it's still something that's going to inform our work, so we can be the best that we can in terms of making change and lives happen. In doing this, there's so much diversity in how you do research. So we have quantitative methods, qualitative, and mixed methods. And I'm going through this very quickly, okay? So quantitative is going to be when we're looking more at measurements. We're doing different types of scales, but it's really focused on numbers and how we can measure those things. Qualitative is something that we do when we're looking for rich data. So it's going to be more interviews. There's not really any scales in there, but we're hearing from people, we're talking with them. And then mixed methods is just what it says, we're mixing them. So we're bringing in quantitative and qualitative. With this research, though, you can do what is called cross-sectional, which is just going to be at that one time point, or you can do longitudinal. So I may take some information now, take some information in a few months, take some information a year later, and then I see what those differences are. So there's many different ways to be looking at the research that you're doing and how you're doing it. But the clinical implications are so important because you can develop gold standards, which are just, this is the best type of treatment that's based on evidence and the research that's been done. But then you can also see population differences. And this is something that's really important to us as Native people, because there are many times that there are models of therapy or models of treatment that are almost pushed upon us, and they don't necessarily fit, but because that's what's out there, that's what they're using. So being able to use research to make those changes is so very important. So just thank you all for allowing me to do this presentation. Thank you for asking me. And I hope that there was information that you'll be able to take, even if it's not specific to today, maybe later down the road, it's something that can be helpful.